In this slideshow, we're going to be looking at energy transformations or conversions, as well as the processes involved in photosynthesis. It's broken up into 3 sections, and each section has highlighted in blue the topic of the particular slideshow set. So really, all life on Earth depends on energy conversions, taking energy that's found in one form and turning it into another form. And the 2 main processes involved in this are photosynthesis, which is going to be the subject of this slideshow, and cellular respiration that we'll look at next time. So if we're going to talk about energy conversions, it's good to know what energy is. And it's the capability of doing work. Work is any time that you are moving matter against an opposing force. In terms of physics, work is applying a force over a distance. There are 2 basic forms of energy: kinetic energy, which is the energy of motion, and potential energy, which is stored energy. There are a variety of types of energy as well. It can be chemical, like a battery, or chemical energy that's stored in food. It can be mechanical energy, the energy of an object in motion. Nuclear energy, the energy that's stored in the bonds that hold the nucleus together for an atom. Gravitational. And you can see a series of other types of energy as well. These types of energy cannot be created or destroyed, but they can be converted from one form into another. So if we look at potential energy and kinetic energy, we see the little man on top of the cliff. We see Princess Molly sitting on the top of the chair, as well as on top of the other dog, Clancy. And as they're perched where they are, the man's standing on the top of the cliff, he has 100% potential energy. He's not moving at all since he's standing still, and he has all of his energy stored in the ability to fall. It took him energy to get up there, and that energy is now stored within him. Same thing with Molly. Took her energy to climb up on top of the dog and to sit on top of the chair, and now she has that energy stored within her. She has the capability of falling off of the chair. If you look after the fall, about halfway down the cliff, the man who probably would no longer be smiling now has half potential energy. He still has the ability to fall the remainder of the way, and half kinetic energy. Half of that energy has been converted from potential to the energy of motion. And a split second before he lands on the ground, he now has 100% kinetic energy. There's pretty much no potential to fall any further, and he's all energy of motion. And the same thing with Molly after she jumped up to catch the snowball. She's just about to land, so she's all kinetic and no potential energy. And so these 2 can swap one for the other. The foods that we eat have chemical energy stored in the bonds holding the sugars, holding the fructose or the glucose together. And when our bodies break down those bonds, detaching a hydrogen from a carbon, energy is released. So pause and think about these for a moment. If you're in the hybrid class, please bring the examples of kinetic and potential energy to class. And hopefully you realized that falling down the stairs, since you are in the process of falling, is going to be predominantly kinetic energy. The cat sitting on the sill has the ability to fall, so that is potential. The clock sweeping, it's moving, so it has kinetic. And water in a cloud has the ability to fall, so that is potential. Now, Newton had realized these laws of energy a long while ago, and the first law of thermodynamics says that energy, indeed mass, matter, and energy cannot be created or destroyed. They can only be converted from one form into another. But these energy conversions are not perfect. In fact, they're highly inefficient. If you look at the energy that comes from the sun, Only 1% of that energy is actually converted into sugars by plants, and 99% of it is converted into something else. So what about that other 99%? The second law of thermodynamics says that every conversion of energy includes the transformation of some of that energy into heat. Unfortunately for organisms, heat is pretty much useless in terms of performing cellular functions. Yes, we do need heat in order to stay alive, but it doesn't sustain our bodies. Our cells cannot use heat energy to fuel their functions. And so heat being useless for organisms, when I say that, that's what I mean, that their cells cannot use heat as a form of energy. So every time we have an energy conversion, some of that, and indeed a great deal of it, is going to be lost. When you put a gallon of gas into your car, only about 10% of that actually fuels moving the car forward, and 90% of it is lost to heat. When you have a light bulb and you turn it on, it was worse with the incandescent bulbs than it is with compact fluorescent or LED bulbs, but we still have a sizable conversion into heat. So think about these, and if you are in the hybrid class, please do make sure that you click on the link down at the bottom to watch it's a pretty neat little 2-minute or so animation video of dominoes falling. So please come ready to talk about these in class, and pause the video until you're done. Okay, so how are the cells fueled from these chemical reactions? Well, for nearly all cells, they cannot function on sunlight. Pretty much, actually, no cells can function on sunlight alone. It is required that that sunlight get converted into sugar, and then that sugar has to be converted again into adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. And this should sound familiar when you hear the ene. Just like oats meant sugar, ene is going to mean that we're talking about a protein. And adenosine should sound familiar because it sounds a whole lot like adenine. So this is a nitrogen-based protein. Tri just means 3, and the phosphate molecules in adenosine triphosphate are the same as those that you saw in DNA, the parts of the nucleotide that were the little pool behind the house. So ATP is the energy that cells can use, or one of the forms of energy that cells can use. If we look at the structure of it, here we see the adenine. There are all the nitrogens, and that very similar structure to the nitrogenous base. Ribose should sound familiar also. That's a sugar. Ose is always a sugar, and ribose is the sugar that we saw in RNA. And then we have the 1, 2, 3 phosphate molecules. And had you built that with the models, it would look like the structure down below. So this is what's going to fuel all life on Earth, ATP, adenosine triphosphate. This is, there's a lot of energy stored in these phosphate bonds to take all these minuses, all these negative charges, and shove one onto the other, bond one with the other. It takes a tremendous amount of energy to overcome the natural repulsion of a negative with another negative. So this is a very high energy bond. And it so happens that this can be recycled. We're going to start out with ATP with the 3 phosphates, and your cells are going to release some of that energy by breaking off one of these phosphates. That's going to turn ATP, adenosine triphosphate, into ADP, adenosine diphosphate, and you see that only has 2 phosphate molecules. So your body will then use energy to force on another phosphate group, which will recharge it, which will change it back into ATP, and this cycle will continue. So ADP is also an energy storage bond, but it's more like an analogous to a battery being halfway charged instead of all the way charged. The ATP has as much energy as it can possibly get, so it's fully charged. ADP could actually lose more energy by chopping off another phosphate, and then it would become AMP, or adenosine monophosphate. So this still has potential energy stored in it. It still is a high energy bond molecule. It's just not as high energy as ATP with the 3 phosphates. And so we're going to recycle these molecules over and over until they become damaged, and then the body will break them down. So think about this for a second, where the potential energy is stored, and unpause it when you're done. And hopefully you realize that ATP and ADP are the sources of potential energy, and so 5 was the best answer, A and C.